Welcome back to the Technology Risk Podcast. Today, we're zeroing in on a case study that really forces us to redefine what a catastrophic digital failure actually looks like.
Exactly. We're moving beyond just the firewall, looking at the physical world too. Our focus is that major fire, the one that struck a government-run data center in Daejeon, South Korea.
And here's the fascinating part, the real conflict. The cause, physical, a fire, a blaze. But the outcome, the service outage, it looked, felt, acted just like a massive, coordinated cyber attack. For the public experiencing it, the difference was, well, it was purely academic, wasn't it?
It really was. And this is critical because these physical incidents, fires, floods, power failures, they aren't some rare edge case anymore. Look at the data from the Uptime Institute. These environmental events, they now account for nearly 30% of large-scale IT outages worldwide.
30%, that's huge.
It is. It basically means physical resilience is cybersecurity now. They're intertwined.
So our mission today is clear. We need to unpack this dual-risk reality. We'll dissect the cascading impacts of this physical catastrophe in Daejeon. And, most importantly, define some integrated strategies for resilience. Strategies that cover both physical and cyber risks for the kind of always-on infrastructure we all rely on.
Absolutely. And before we really dive in, just a quick reminder, if you find this analysis useful, please do subscribe to the Technology Risk Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, and really all the other major podcast platforms. Your subscriptions genuinely help us keep doing this research.
Okay, let's start right at the scene. Daejeon, what exactly happened? What was the sequence of failure when that fire hit?
Well, it wasn't just, a small fire contained in one server room. A serious blaze tore through the facility. It destroyed primary systems, obviously. But the real lesson, I think, is in the cascading support failures. The fire knocked out the cooling systems. Critical. And then the backup power. Either it failed to kick in properly, or it also sustained damage. When that support infrastructure collapses, everything just stops. Doesn't matter how secure the data itself might be conceptually.
And the immediate fallout. The details really do read like something from a digital war zone scenario. This single failure point paralyzed core national services.
Yeah.
Just think about the daily life impact for a citizen there. Postal operations crippled. Mail, parcel tracking systems gone. Vanished.
Yeah, and it hit basic identity too. Government ID verification services were disrupted. That halts access to almost everything permits. Basic transactions online. We saw huge delays in banking networks, even sensitive stuff like accessing school records or national testing data. Inaccessible. It's a stark example of how centralization translates directly into national vulnerability.
And the recovery time. I mean, in our modern world, we expect instant recovery, right? But the timeline for Daejeon was anything but. Some systems limped back online after a few days, sure, but full restoration of critical services took weeks. In a hyper-connected society like South Korea, weeks of digital darkness. That's an eternity.
It really is. And that delay, it points to some deep-seated systemic issues in disaster recovery planning. It's not just a South Korea problem either. The Insurance Information Institute reports that the average data center fire event leads to 21 days of service disruption.
21 days. Average.
Now, why 21 days? That tells you the bottlenecks aren't just, restarting virtual machines. It's physical procurement. It's insurance red tape. It's the sheer difficulty of rebuilding highly customized government-grade infrastructure, basically from scratch.
That 21-day statistic,
Yeah.
That's the gap between having a disaster plan on paper and having one that actually prevents complete business or service failure, which forces us into our next point, this psychological impact, the illusion of cyber attack.
Right. Because when citizens lose access, they don't really care why. They don't submit a ticket asking, was this a fire or a hack?
Yeah.
The perception is almost always one of a digital siege, a digital attack. The outcome: lost access, commerce halted, huge public frustration. It feels exactly the same as if, say, North Korea had launched a massive denial of service strike. The intent behind the disruption is irrelevant to the person affected. The effect is losing that critical function.
And this really throws a harsh spotlight on the fragility that centralization creates. The very fact that one single facility could host so many mission-critical national systems, it seems, well, almost negligent looking back, especially in today's threat landscape.
It's a global structural weakness, unfortunately. We looked at OECD data. It shows that 59% of governments centralize their core citizen services into fewer than 3 data centers.
Wow, 59%, over half.
Yeah, so if over half the major governments in the developed world are operating with that level of inherent centralization risk, we're looking at widespread systemic risk potential.
But why is that? I mean, governments understand redundancy for physical things like bridges, power grids. Why are they often so slow to embrace it digitally? Is it just cost, or is there something else like bureaucracy?
It's often a mix. Political expediency plays a role, certainly, and some legacy thinking. Centralizing IT services is often sold as an efficiency move, right? Save money, simplify management, one budget line, one point of control. But that efficiency comes at the direct cost of resilience. They're essentially trading small, marginal cost savings today for potentially catastrophic liability down the road.
The analogy we keep coming back to really fits here. Centralization creates that single, big, fat, weak link. Doesn't matter if that weak link is a burning fuse box, like in Daejeon, or maybe a compromised software integration from a single vendor, like we've seen with attacks like the Collins Aerospace one. The blast radius is always defined by how many services depend on that one single point.
And that blast radius, it comes with a very measurable, frankly terrifying cost. Which brings us to the financial and trust costs of ignoring this dual physical cyber risk reality.
When recovery gets delayed, like it did in Daejeon, the cost isn't linear, it's exponential. You go beyond the hard costs of just replacing equipment.
Right.
You lose citizen trust. You lose faith in the government's ability to deliver. And you lose staggering amounts in GDP productivity when core commerce and services are down.
We should try and put a number on that liability, even if it's an estimate. Gartner estimates the average cost of critical infrastructure downtime is around $9,000 per minute.
Per minute.
Per minute. Now, you take that 21-day average disruption time for a fire event we talked about. That figure quickly escalates from being just an IT issue into a full-blown national fiscal crisis. 3 weeks at $9,000 a minute, you're approaching national budget line item territory.
So the core lesson here, and we probably can't overstate this enough, is that resilience planning has to be agnostic. It shouldn't care about the threat vector. We have to treat physical disasters, fire, flood, earthquakes, and cyber incidents ransomware, hacking with exactly the same seriousness. Because both types of events cripple the same mission-critical services, and both create the same kind of panicked outcome for the end user.
Absolutely. If you're relying on just one facility, whether it's government-run or a single commercial vendor, you've basically built in a guaranteed exposure point. You could have the world's best software security, the best firewalls, but it means absolutely nothing if the building's generator floods or the cooling system fails.
Okay, so let's pivot then. We've analyzed the problem. Let's talk solutions. For people listening who manage complex infrastructure, what are the actionable strategies? How do you achieve true dual resilience?
Well, the foundation is definitely distribution. We have got to stop thinking about resilience as just, adding more backup drives in the same server room.
Right, which brings us straight to step one. Diversify your data hosting. Move beyond that all eggs in one basket model. Sounds simple on the surface, but we need to acknowledge the complexity, right? Diversification isn't just copying data. It means mastering regulatory compliance across different regions, dealing with latency issues. It's not trivial.
Exactly right. And that complexity is where step 2, the hybrid approach, becomes really powerful. Using cloud plus on-prem hybrid models. You get flexibility from the public cloud, think elasticity, scalability, built-in geographic diversity for failover. But you can simultaneously keep private facilities for your highly sensitive, maybe custom or compliance-heavy workloads. This approach actively reduces that single-site risk by spreading workloads across fundamentally different operational structures.
And we absolutely have to revisit the physical layer itself. So, step 3, a renewed commitment, really, to strengthening physical security. And this isn't just about, better fences or guards. We're talking critical internal systems, redundant cooling, fully tested, hardened backup power units, advanced fire suppression systems. These need to be prioritized, funded, and tested, just like software defenses, like firewalls or intrusion detection. We spend fortunes on firewalls, but how much do we really spend ensuring the redundant HVAC can actually survive a localized fire?
That's often the biggest disconnect in budgets, isn't it? Which leads to step 4. We have to change how we test our readiness. We need to run dual risk scenarios in our tabletop exercises. Don't just simulate a ransomware attack. Pair that simulation with a major physical catastrophe. What happens if the power grid goes black during a ransomware attack? Or what if a major flood takes out the building where your supposedly safe failover records are stored?
Testing those combined, messy, complex scenarios. That's where preparedness often breaks down in reality. Okay, finally, step 5. Establish definitive and rapid failover plans. We're talking real geo-redundant backups, real-time replication, and documented, proven, near-instantaneous switchover processes.
And the stats really back up the need for that speed. Uptime Institute, again, they confirm organizations that have full geo-redundancy restore 5 times faster after a major outage.
5 times faster.
5 times. That difference turns that potential 21 days of national crisis into maybe, 4 or 5 days of localized service degradation? That has to be the goal.
Okay, we've laid out the strategy. Let's make it really concrete with a couple of examples. The power of geo-distribution, when it's done right, is actually quite stunning.
Yeah, think about a major global cloud provider. They face a significant physical power incident in one of their big regions. It happens. But because their entire architecture assumes physical failure will happen somewhere, sometimes they have that built-in geo-distributed redundancy, that potential catastrophe was largely contained. Customers might have seen maybe minutes of slightly higher latency before traffic was fully rerouted elsewhere. The system essentially absorbed a major physical blow and just kept running. That's resilience defined.
Now, compare that to the failure example, which unfortunately we see too often, especially in government or maybe older enterprise setups. We saw a case a government agency hosted its core ID verification services entirely in a single building. When that building suffered a flash flood, not even a massive hurricane, just a localized flood, the physical servers in the basement were destroyed. The entire system just stopped. Services stayed offline for months. It's just proof positive. Centralization without comprehensive physical planning turns a localized incident into a complete systemic liability.
And this is exactly why the conversation has to move into the regulatory sphere now. Governments, organizations, they can't just cross their fingers and trust vendors or hope it doesn't happen to them. Systemic change is needed.
So you're arguing then that regulators should actually mandate multi-region redundancy for any provider, any vendor supplying critical citizen services. Essentially, treating these data centers not just as IT real estate, but as actual critical infrastructure.
Precisely. These data centers are as essential as power grids, as hospitals in the modern world. They need to be held to similar mandated standards for geographic diversity, for physical resilience planning. If a simple flood can take out your nation's ability to run a passport check or verify identity, that's fundamentally a national security failure.
That's a powerful concluding thought for this section. Resilience isn't just an IT budget issue. It needs to be budgeted, regulated, and viewed right through the lens of national security. It demands serious investment in what we could almost call digital civil defense, ensuring the core functions of society can't be taken down by a single event, physical or digital.
So just to quickly summarize the absolute critical lesson from Daejeon, true resilience isn't just about defending against the sophisticated hacker, the cyber threat. It's fundamentally about preparing for the mundane physical failure, the fire, the flood, the simple power outage, because that failure feels exactly the same to the user and causes the exact same systemic disruption.
So we strongly urge you, our listener, take a really critical look at your own risk map. Audit where your mission-critical systems actually reside right now, diversify those facilities, and maybe most importantly, stop running the easy disaster recovery exercises. Rehearse those horrible worst-case dual-risk scenarios, physical and digital happening together, to really test your true readiness.
And maybe here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on, that always-on infrastructure we depend on. It's only ever as strong as its absolute weakest point. And sometimes, maybe often, that weakest point isn't your most sophisticated firewall. Sometimes it's sitting miles away, maybe unprotected, right next to a faulty air conditioning unit or an old generator.
A very profound point to end on. Thank you for joining us for this analysis of dual risk resilience. Please remember to subscribe to the Technology Risk Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, and other platforms where you get your podcasts. We'll catch you next time.